Our story today took place in Tunisia, and I send my greetings to all the people of Tunisia. The story is told by a mosque imam named Sheikh al-Baghdadi, who faced numerous experiences with demons. But this story was the strangest of them all. The tale spread among the people, and even some Tunisian newspapers mentioned it, especially after the mysterious death of Sheikh al-Baghdadi. It all started when Sheikh al-Baghdadi received an invitation from the residents of an old house in the historic area of Mohammedia in Tunisia. The house was in extremely poor condition, so dilapidated that one might think it would collapse at any moment. The family living there was very poor, consisting of a widowed mother and 2 sons, with the eldest son having lost his mind and suffering from seizures. Sheikh al-Baghdadi asked the mother about the reason for her son's madness, and she told him that her son had been normal and healthy until the day he disappeared for 2 years after entering a tunnel in a place called Al-Dawami, near their home. When he returned, he had lost his mind, and strange things began happening in the house, but the family had nowhere else to go. Sheikh al-Baghdadi described how the mother told him that she would see strange people suddenly appear in the house and hear odd sounds coming from beneath the ground and the walls. They also found hair and dirt in their food. Once, a neighbor's son saw people walking through the house, but only the upper halves of their bodies appeared, making the scene terrifying. Sheikh al-Baghdadi noticed that the younger son had lost one of his teeth, so he asked him about it. The son told him that while praying in one of the rooms, he encountered a strange black cat with its head twisted in the opposite direction of its body. He thought it was dead, but when he tried to check it with a stick, the cat jumped in his face and spoke in an incomprehensible language before running to the kitchen and disappearing. That night, the son dreamed of a tall black entity with long arms holding a stick, angry at him for hitting the cat. He woke up to find his tooth broken, and blood was dripping from his mouth. On a cold night, the son heard loud knocks on the door. He woke up to see who was knocking but found no one. When he returned to bed, the knocking intensified, and he heard someone calling him loudly. He got up again and opened the door, but no one was there. On the 3rd knock, he realized that the sound wasn't coming from the door but from inside his closet. Frozen with fear, his eyes wide open in shock, he couldn't move or even blink as he stared at the closet in disbelief. Suddenly, the closet door began to open slowly, and a thin, bald figure emerged, breathing strangely. Its eyes gleamed in the dark like snake eyes, and it had no hair on its body, except for hair around its waist that covered its private parts. It moved on its hands and feet like an animal. The boy says, "I closed my eyes out of sheer fear, my limbs froze, and I stayed frozen until that creature left the room without harming me. I remember that I couldn't sleep or even move from my spot that night." Sheikh al-Baghdadi was surprised by the man's story, so he consulted with Sheikh al-Jaridi, another mosque imam, and they agreed to start reading the Quran in the house quickly, as the events there were extremely strange. It was nighttime, and as soon as they started reading, the electricity suddenly went out. They began hearing footsteps moving around them, as if they were not alone in the house. But they weren't scared, and continued reading until the electricity and lights returned. When the lights came back, they were shocked to see filthy footprints on the floor, and even the ceiling had strange writings on it. Every time they started reading, these phenomena repeated, and they continued this way until they completed part of the Quran. After that, they noticed that the mother seemed sad and distressed. They advised her to go with her eldest son to stay at a neighbor's house, leaving the younger child alone in the house as they wanted to finish reading without further disturbance. The next day, the mother and her son returned, while the 2 sheikhs stayed with the younger child, and they began reading the Quran again. After a few minutes, the child fainted, and Sheikh al-Baghdadi placed his hand on his head and continued reading. Then they heard strange laughter, almost like the barking of dogs, as if it were coming from an old man, and the sound seemed to come from underground. Sheikh al-Baghdadi stopped reading, while Sheikh al-Jaridi continued. Al-Baghdadi leaned toward the ground to listen better, and heard the laughter growing louder, which made his heart tighten. He asked loudly, "Who are you?" But no one answered, and the sound increased. He asked again, "Who are you?" And the voice responded, "Get out of my land." Then the voice gradually faded until the child woke up and began vomiting strands of hair. Days passed, and they continued to return daily to read the Quran, but the strange events never stopped. One day, while they were reading, the mother asked for permission to go to the bathroom, which was in a distant corner of the house. They allowed her to go, and they stopped reading so she wouldn't hear the Quran in the bathroom. But suddenly, they heard a knock on the door. When al-Baghdadi opened the door, he was shocked to find that it was the mother herself knocking. He asked, "Then who is in the bathroom?" On another day, after finishing the Quran recitation and deciding to take a short break, Sheikh al-Baghdadi fell asleep. When he woke up, he found himself alone in the house and the sun had already set. He felt confused and scared, especially when he heard whispers and strange sounds coming from everywhere. He saw shadows as if someone was watching him, but every time he entered a room, it was empty. Eventually, he rushed out of the house in fear. The next day, he asked Sheikh al-Juraydi, "Why did you leave me alone while I was asleep?" Al-Juraydi replied that it was al-Baghdadi who had asked to be left alone and go out, and the mother confirmed this when she returned and found no one except her young son. The strange events continued, and one night, Sheikh al-Baghdadi dreamed of entering a narrow tunnel near the family's house. When he told Sheikh al-Juraydi about the dream, he was surprised to find that al-Juraydi had the same dream with the exact details. They asked the mother about the tunnel, and she answered, "Yes, my son went into that hole before he disappeared." They decided to go down the tunnel to search for answers. After Fajr prayer, they went with the mother who guided them to the location. Al-Baghdadi entered first, followed by al-Juraydi. The tunnel was very dark and narrow, and the lamp they carried barely lit anything. They continued walking for about 10 minutes, but despite the passage of time, there was no sign of dawn. When they finally emerged, they found themselves in a dark desert. When they looked back, the exit had vanished, as if the hole had never existed. Al-Juraydi tried to dig, but to no avail. They realized that the event was caused by demons, and the tunnel was a gateway to their world. Al-Baghdadi says, "The sand surrounded us on all sides, with endless dunes, except for one direction where clay houses appeared in the distance with flames rising from them. We decided to head towards these houses, and they seemed close. But strangely, every time we got closer, they kept moving farther away, as if they were impossible to reach. We continued walking despite our exhaustion, reciting prayers, until we finally felt we were getting closer. The closer we got, the more we could hear eerie sounds of flutes, drums, and songs resembling animal howls. When we arrived, we saw a group of naked people dancing around a blazing fire, but they had no shadows, and their feet left no marks on the ground. One of them approached us, and his face changed in a strange way. When he reached us, he said, "Sit down." I was about to sit when I said, "Bismillah." Suddenly, I found myself and Sheikh al-Juraydi sitting on a rock in an empty place, with everything around us, even the houses, vanished. We began to seek forgiveness out of fear. Then we heard heavy footsteps behind us. We turned to see a fat man riding an exhausted black camel under its weight, with a wooden crown full of insects on his head. He spoke in a heavy voice. "What brings you here? Don't you know this place is forbidden for humans?" We told him our story, and he said, "This is not your concern. The boy has a debt to settle, and his house originally belonged to us. I advise you to leave immediately." We tried to leave, but couldn't find the way out. The man said, "You will find the hole, but don't look back or you'll regret it." We walked until we saw two creatures with the body of a dog and the head of a human, digging the earth until the hole appeared. I descended first, lowering my head to avoid looking back, and I heard Sheikh al-Juraydi calling his mother and then screaming as his voice disappeared. I didn't look back, fearful of the demon's warnings, kept going until I exited the tunnel. I waited a long time, but Sheikh al-Juraydi never appeared and vanished without a trace. The story spread among the people, and they tried to search for him but found nothing. Even the tunnel disappeared as if it had never existed. After some time, the house was demolished, and a mosque was built in its place, named Muhammad al-Juraydi Mosque. Strangely, Sheikh al-Baghdadi was later found dead in his house, with ants eating his head, and his limbs were detached from his body. This is truly a terrifying story, and I don't know whether it's real or not. I hope our friends in Tunisia can tell us if they've heard of similar stories. As for me, I was extremely scared even while recording this video. I hope you enjoyed the story, and if you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Goodbye.